In Hollywood, there are tales of tragedy and glory blend together like an endless symphony. Robert was there. The renowned American actor Redford wrote his narrative not just by roles that are ageless, but also via fatherhood's emotional journey. However, he has since died, leaving behind a void that cannot be filled hearts of those who admire him. The sorrow over Redford's passing turns into even more sharp when remembering that his life was filled with tears. Observing twice the death of a son, Scott, his firstborn, passed away, leaving his spirit was deeply scarred. Additionally, when James's third kid, Redford, died that wound appeared to cut at the age of 58. Deeper still, James was more than just the son of an icon, but also a remarkable self-sufficient individual, inheriting and advancing the legacy of the family in his own manner. As a filmmaker of documentaries, James, a social activist, utilized his ability and individual experiences to convey humane messages, knowledge of the environment, and the power of fortitude. However, his life was also characterized by difficult trials. An uncommon childhood autoimmune disease, 2 liver replacements, and ultimately an unfair fight against cancer. Behind each picture, each significant James's project stood the silence. Assistance to Robert, not just as a dad, but as a friend as well. If you ever admired him, write in a comment, "I affection for Robert Redford," as a last goodbye to the man who spent his whole existence between darkness and light, between celebrity and personal grief. Now, let's embark on that incredible voyage to observe that beneath a timeless Hollywood legend was a loving dad, a heart grief-stricken but persistently committed to both family and the arts. This isn't just the tale of a brief but motivational life, as well as evidence of the fatherly love's eternal power, a light that glimmering in the shadow of loss and sorrow. A legend in Hollywood was Robert Redford, the stylish face that appears on magazine covers. Millions of people loved the star every time he crossed the red carpet. However, when his house's doors shut, that brightness decreased, exposing a very meek Robert, a reserved dad who had a deep-seated dread of losing a kid much more than the anxiety of losing a part of his offspring. James, there was a specific space for Redford, not only due to his natural talent and uncommon empathy, but also due to the fact that it was a tragedy, which held the father and son together as though by accident. James was raised between 2 rival worlds. One side featured the brilliant Hollywood's brightness, where his father ruled as a symbol and focal point of pay attention. Conversely, there were the straightforward Robert is highly valued in daily life, kept for his family. Warm meals, escapes, and a nature at home, distant from the cameras, as well as lessons in compassion and modesty. Because of this stress, James was transformed into a new person, a boy who longed to produce, but had a persistent fear that things might turn against him at any time. Additionally, it was from the very conflict that their relationship deepened, not based on celebrity, but on how they both learned to be confident in front of the severe punches from fate. From early childhood, James carried the burden of a rare disease, colonitis with primary sclerosing. It was like a lingering, suspended sentence him, pretending many years of medical care as well as medicine. James's fight suffering unbearable agony when his weakened body ready for the first liver Robert Redford transplant shed the final hints of Hollywood glitz. He wasn't no longer the figure that millions of people adore, but a dad quietly seated at his son's holding James's hand by the bedside like though to let him leave would be to lose him forever. James went through not just one, but 1993 saw 2 transplants. Each hour spent waiting outside the operation room was extended for compared to any movie shoot in his profession. During those times, 60 years of a Hollywood victory was meaningless. That the only thing left was a tie between a father and son that went beyond anything custom, binding them together with suffering, endurance, and optimism. However, James refused to allow his life be buried by disease. Rather, he turned tragedy into creative energy, into the motivation behind films that are full of humanity. And instead of taking the lead from the front, decided to accompany him. And in 2005, a father and son jointly established the Redford Center is experiencing a loss. into a global collective legacy. If Robert contributed his stature and influence of an icon, James gave it a youthful feel, bravery, and creativity. The outcome was not merely praised documentaries, but strong appeals for action that struck a chord with millions of people, encouraging viewers to not just observe, but to act, to ponder. It served as tangible evidence that echoes could be produced by fatherly affection well beyond what is considered art. The Robert and James's relationship, Redford, was more than just a tale of a father and son. It was a complicated symphony with entwined notes of love, combined tragic chords to produce a light that persisted. A light that isn't blinding stardom in Hollywood, yet stable enough to lead the way while being surrounded by sickness and loss. Additionally, when Robert Redford's personal adventure came to an end, the ensuing sadness was not just for his legacy of cinema, but for the personal tale of a father and son, where human kindness surpasses even the brightest spotlight. To comprehend James Redford's such a significant location in the center of a legend, we have to go back to the start, his early years. Because it was during those early years, through lessons learned, loss, and the affection of family, for whom the seeds were sown, a delicate spirit that would ultimately decide to turn sorrow into a lasting legacy of humanity for the planet. Redford, James was born in New York on May 5, 1962. City into a well-known household that put human values and family values first. Yes, being Robert's third kid, Lola Van Wagenen and Redford, James grew growing up with his two sisters, Shauna, Amy, in a setting surrounded by artistic ability, but also enhanced by knowledge of accountability and empathy. But James' early years were anything but a rose garden. His early death, Scott, an older brother who died only from sudden infant death syndrome months following his 1959 birth, left a substantial gap in the family. This catastrophe not only had a profound impact on his parents, but also imparted a unique, sensitive manner in which they brought up their kids. Even so, the Redfords was well known among artists. James grew up in an environment that highlighted modesty and a feeling of accountability. In particular, Robert's parents were devoted to protecting their kids from the seductive charm of Hollywood renown. Rather, they promoted James will follow his sisters, pursue your own interests, and travel the world. Through instruction and practical experience encounters, his brother's passing, Scott, had a significant impact on how James grew up with his siblings. His Robert and Lola, the parents, made every endeavor to keep a nice and intimate family relationship, imparting ideals of consideration and defense of one another. In the Redford home, every day was an instruction on how to value time spent together and taking on life's unexpected difficulties. James was shaped by these encounters, providing he gained an early awareness of life's vulnerability and the value of family. James was brought up to be more than just an autonomous person, but also to recognize the importance of making a contribution to his neighborhood. From his parents, he discovered how to enjoy the little things in life. Occasions like a picnic with the family or a warm evening of discussion. His environment fostered a strong enthusiasm and a kind heart for narrative, which he would subsequently become a profession. But James growing up was not without its challenges, especially in light of his health. He had primary sclerosing at a young age. An uncommon autoimmune condition is colonitis that had a serious impact on his liver. This illness brought more than just bodily suffering, but also evaluated the emotional fortitude of James's relatives. Instead of allowing these difficulties to hinder him, James discovered how to address them with resolve and an optimistic attitude, traits that he maintained throughout his existence. Early in life, James Redford was a blend of shade and light, of straightforward family happiness and unforeseen adversity. However, these encounters were exactly what that molded a really compassionate individual, patience, and a resolute attitude drive. Attributes that would turn into the basis for his subsequent achievements. A documentary called James Redford Director, whose work was influenced by individual accounts and societal concerns he had a strong passion for. Sketching based on his extensive life experiences, James continuously utilized his skills to make human-rich films with the goal of not only to share tales, but also to motivate shift. Although his career didn't last as long as Robert Redford, his father, James, established a distinct position for himself in the motion picture industry, leaving an incredibly significant legacy. James's first appearance, The Kindness of Strangers project, in 1999, was inspired by his personal health journey. Having had 2 liver transplants, 1993, James developed a profound comprehension of the significance of support and compassion amid the most trying times of life. In addition to sharing the tales of organ recipients and donors, but also emphasized the significant interpersonal emotional ties using a strategy that was both genuine and intensely sentimental. James gave a humanistic viewpoint that sparked kindness and promoted discussion regarding organ donation. The popularity of the movie was based on the basis for James' signature manner, tackling social concerns from a personal perspective. Expanding upon this achievement, the overall picture in 2012, Rethinking Dyslexia, marked an important turning point in James' profession. Motivated by his son's, James's dyslexia experience, contested long-held myths regarding this disparity in learning. The documentary highlighted the fact that dyslexia is not a shortcoming, but a special method of reasoning that can result in extraordinary accomplishments. With notable individuals such as Charles Branson and Richard Branson, The Big Picture, Schwab, was more than just a movie. It was an appeal for reform in child support and education with dyslexia. The documentary was given widespread praise. It into a standard in educational institutions and organizations and demonstrated James' storytelling skills that had an impact and were relevant. Apart from private matters, James had a strong interest in environmental reasons. In 2012, Watershed, he worked alongside his father, Robert Redford, to investigate the water shortage in the West in America. The movie not only discussed the grave repercussions of inadequate water management, but moreover suggested workable remedies, highlighting how urgent conservation is. Combining striking visuals within James turned Watershed with his emotive appeal into an effective teaching instrument that raises worldwide consciousness regarding water conservation. As it happens, a clean 2017's energy revolution, James added to demonstrate his idea for a more sustainable world. The movie looked at the switch from fossil fuels to U.S. renewable energy through first-hand accounts from businesses and communities. James provided a positive and motivating viewpoint, proving that tiny individual adjustments could result in substantial effects on the environment. The documentary wasn't only factual report, but a call to action that steps to embrace clean energy. In addition to his own documentaries, the Redford Center was co-founded by James and his dad in 2005. This group is dedicated to helping independent producers and filmmakers pieces that increase understanding of social as well as environmental concerns. James wasn't not just a narrator, but also a facilitator, generating chances for fresh perspectives to be heard. Under its direction, the Redford Center developed into an essential platform, producing work with extensive impact. The work of James' Redford career was evidence of his steadfast enthusiasm and dedication to the arts and community. Every one of his movies has a narrative, a message, and a distinct goal to raise awareness and motivate action. However, although he didn't live long, his legacy behind demonstrates how potent art can be. Instrument for bringing about global change. By means of his works, James did not merely carry on Robert Redford's heritage, but also created an autonomous voice and a unique vision that will last forever by movie buffs. James Redford wasn't just regarded as a gifted director, but also as a representation of tenacity in the face of hardship. He lived a sequence of struggles with disease. However, rather than James, allowing them to define him changed these difficulties into inspiration to make changes for himself as well as the neighborhood. From an early age, James was afflicted with primary sclerosis. An uncommon autoimmune condition is colonitis that seriously damaged the liver. This was not only difficult physically, but a protracted mental struggle as well. In 1993, as his health deteriorated, James had 2 consecutive liver transplants. These procedures not only save his life, but also created a new chapter, increasing his understanding of the fragility of life and the strength of empathy. His encounters with disease encouraged James to create the James Redford Transplant Institute Awareness, a group committed to promoting organ donation awareness as well as transplanting. Through this group, he disseminated his narrative and established a platform to assist individuals in comparable situations. James thought his voyage could encourage others to support this humanitarian cause. Purpose: providing fresh chances for people that are less fortunate. But James' health challenges didn't stop there. In 2019, he was identified as having intrahepatic cholangioma, is a serious and kind of bile duct that is difficult to cure cancer. He was waiting at the time, a second liver transplant to extend his life. In spite of the enormous obstacles, James remained positive and carried on working, finishing documentaries, and taking part in community-based activities. He once revealed that he found optimism in his profession and vitality in the most trying circumstances. James not only had to deal with outstanding poise, but also made advantage of his time to share compassionate messages, as well as sharing. During his latter days, he stayed committed to his friends, family, and the endeavors he was enthusiastic about roughly. Even though he died of cancer September 2020, James' legacy endures through his motion pictures, the institutions he constructed, and his unwavering spirit in the face of hardship. James Redford's illness struggle did not make him weaker. Rather, it made him become an influence to those all around him. His upbeat demeanor, tenacity, and dedication to assist others serve as evidence of the resilience of the human spirit when faced with obstacles that appear insurmountable difficulties. James Redford is not only for himself, but also to make the world a better place where tales of empathy and the strength of community be passed down through the generations to come on. James Redford wasn't just honored for his noteworthy contributions to his profession, but in addition to treasured as a devoted parent, husband, and sympathetic companion who consistently placed a higher priority on family and personal connections. His private life demonstrated a harmony between enthusiasm for one's work and family devotion, providing a thorough depiction of a man who lived his life according to the principles he had faith in. James married Kyle in 1988, his lifelong companion Redford, who stood by his side through all the highs and lows of life and lows. They were married for more than 3 decades, constructed on a basis of profound compassion and affection. Kyle wasn't not only a spouse, but a genuine collaborator in James' artistic endeavors and social endeavors. She provided assistance and shared his original plan when he founded the organ donation support group he was really passionate about documentaries. Roughly, the pair had 2 kids. Lena and Dylan were James' best friends. Motivation and pride. Dylan, their eldest, used as the basis for the documentary the big and image of James rethinking dyslexia, aimed to assist by sharing his son's experience. People dealing with comparable difficulties. James, as a father, consistently supported his kids to pursue their interests and remain loyal to themselves. Regarding Lena, his James, the youngest, was not just a parent, but also a guide, always willing to teach morals and a humanistic viewpoint on the world. In spite of his James found family time amidst his hectic work. Highest priority. He loved his family. Picnics and informal dinners with his spouse and kids, as well as excursions to reunite with nature, an essential aspect of his existence. James saw family as more than just a location to go back to, as well as his anchor and biggest motivator, particularly during the most difficult periods. But James' private life was not without its own amount of suffering and difficulties. Dealing with sickness all the time for a large portion of his life, his family had to overcome a great deal of adversity. However, in these moments, the affection and connection between them became even more powerful. Kyle once revealed that even with James' challenges in their last years, their family took pleasure in simple times in life, with Dylan and Lena is giving both parents strength while they were at their lowest. Friends and James is frequently described by coworkers as a trustworthy and true friend. Regardless of whether at work or in daily life, he had a method of making others feel understood and heard. His kindness, wit, and warmth made leaving a deep impression on everyone he came across. Relationships are important to James, weren't merely a component of life, but a motivation for his inventiveness and commitment. The private life of James Redford was a real and expression of his personality. A profoundly sentimental individual who cherished his family and connections above all. Despite his difficulties, James stayed unwavering in his faith in love and the significance of sharing. This conviction assisted him in creating a rewarding and living a purposeful life and leaving a legacy not just by his labor, but also by his affection for those nearest to him. James's last years Redford's existence was characterized by resolve and intent as he remained committed to his community, profession, and family in spite of his health issues. Following being identified in 2019 as having bile duct cancer, James resisted being overcome by hardship. Rather, he concentrated on completing artistic endeavors, bolstering the principles he had sought all of his life, and spent priceless moments spent with his loved ones. Even though James's health is deteriorating, kept a positive attitude and worked nonstop. In the interim, he continued to exercise his leadership role, prioritizing at the Redford Center social justice and the environment initiatives to guarantee that the tales he believed in would be told over and over again. He recognized that the strength of the value of documentaries was not limited to their artistic worth, as well as in their capacity to alter how individuals perceive the world. Family became more significant than before. Throughout James's latter years, Kyle, his wife, and Dylan and Lena, their 2 kids, were his main sources of assistance, assisting him in overcoming the most difficult days. According to Kyle, James spent whenever he could spend time with his family, from simple meals with each other to meaningful discussions concerning the future. Being aware James had limited time, so he made making his loved one's day unforgettable. James died in October of 2020, leaving a gap that cannot be filled the affection of his friends, family, and admirers. Kyle, his wife, posted on social press, "We are devastated by James' passing, but we also appreciate his life, and the times he spent with us was evidence of kindness, love, and the determination to triumph against hardship." Her remarks were not just an homage to a remarkable individual, but also honoring the principles he left behind. The legacy of James Redford is inscribed in addition to the deeply humanistic documentaries he produced, but in addition to the projects and organizations he established. The Institute of James Redford for Awareness of Transplants increased regarding organ donation and gave people hope. Thousands of patients. In the meanwhile, the Redford Center keeps motivating and encourage independent filmmakers globally, enabling them to share tales pertaining to social justice and preservation of the environment. In addition to his creative accomplishments, James left a more profound legacy, a tenacity and empathy that motivated everyone in his vicinity. Individuals who collaborated with him frequently characterized James as someone who prioritized and always listened to the welfare of the community and never gave up when things became tough. These values not only distinguished him in his career, but also made a lasting impact on people who were familiar with and liked him. To his friends and family, James Redford represented optimism and persistence. Despite his short existence, what he left behind is still there. From the tales he shared and the endeavors he completed with love and hope that he taught others, James was not only a director and an inspiration, letting us know that regardless of despite how challenging life may be, we may make a difference by living passionately and fully in empathy. James Redford lived a resilient life and affection, abandoning a humanistic legacy that surpasses the films he produced. However, if that heritage was visible to the world, then behind the doors of his relatives was another matter, where the image of Robert Redford as a Hollywood star, but just as a dad walking silently with his son. As James fought his sickness in silence, Robert Redford appeared to put the accolades aside that had been with him all his life. He had lost the dapper appearance on magazine covers, which are no longer as brilliant celebrity on the red carpet. Rather, he decided to sit quietly in the background, observing in silence as a spectator in his son's live theater. He took a seat, observing James keep working to give each his last bit of power. Documentary endeavor. As though each James's remaining creative moment was more valuable than Robert's six-decade profession. To him, the name Sundance, once praised by the entire world, the child no longer mattered. The sole item he wished to hear, straightforward but revered, were the words, "James's dad." As James shut down his short trip, the suffering Robert transcended typical parental love. James was more than just a son, but a partner in lofty ideas as well. They established the Redford Center, changing loss experiences, turning suffering into inspiration to offer worth for the neighborhood. James was acquainted with his father, not just as a legendary figure in Hollywood, but as a man who is still grieving over his lost Scott, his firstborn son. The pair of they fulfilled one another as necessary, fragments of a larger image of love and resilience. And Redford did, after James died, lose more than simply his son. He lost a piece of his soul, an uncommon kinship spirit that accompanied him on numerous evenings of sadness. Maybe this explains why, when the globe bowed to say goodbye to Robert, people in Redford lamented not just a timeless movie star, but also a parent with a grief-scarred heart. Since the lights are so brilliant behind the classic movies, the greatest legacy in addition to artwork, there was a narrative of fatherly affection. Not a bright light, but long-lasting, cozy, and unavoidable. Not even death can put an end to it. Although James Redford's life was brief, bright, akin to a burning candle aims to shed light on societal issues and leave enduring principles for the community. Additionally, Robert Redford, that road was traveled by the companion, father, with him until he left here too. The world, with pride and an endless sadness. It was similar to two generations of the same heritage. Someone who started with millions of people were moved by imaginary tales, and another who kept making documentaries that evoked empathy and demanded take action. When Robert is mentioned, they'll recall a Hollywood Redford myth. When they mention James, they'll remember a director, Redford. He lived according to his principles. However, more importantly, what makes their tale timeless is the father-son relationship. A relationship it transformed sadness into power and loss into a legacy. Additionally, maybe the Redford family's biggest legacy does not reside in accolades or eternal movies, but in its message to humanity that love, compassion, and fortitude can conquer any darkness. Additionally, when reflecting on Robert's voyage and what most moves you, James Redford, the fame of Hollywood, the enduring movies, or this straightforward, tear-stained tale of the family, post your ideas in the remarks, and remember to continue. Please subscribe to our channel, examining the poignant tales that shine behind the spotlight of celebrity.